Okay, we're live. We can begin the meeting.
All right, good evening. I'd like to call to order the March 11th, 2021 special meeting of the Methacton School District Board of Directors. Please rise for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The public is hereby advised of the audio and video recording of this meeting for the purposes of rebroadcasting. Given the need to conduct this meeting in a virtual environment, the board required members of the public wanting to make comments on agenda items to pre-register by 5 p.m. today. By way of attendance, I'll do a roll call vote. Ms. Cancro?
Here.
Hammond?
Here.
Ms. Hull?
Here.
Mr. McGinnis?
Here.
Mr. Navarrete?
Here.
Ms. Purdue is not present. Ms. Reese?
Here.
Mr. Winters?
Here.
All right. With that, we'll turn it over to Dr. Zerbe for recognition of guests and scheduled speakers.
Thank you, Madam President. This evening, we have one guest and scheduled speaker. We have the Arrowhead change order request. And as we customarily do with construction projects whereby there's a change order over $10,000, as we've determined, would go before the board for consideration. This evening is like no other, is like other evenings that we've had where we had to bring forth to the board and during other construction projects a change order that was over the $10,000. And this evening we have both KCBA and Fidavia here to explain what the matter is, and then to make a recommendation for the board's consideration this evening so we can continue with the construction project for the new Arrowhead Elementary School. So with that said, I believe we have Mr. Bob Montaigne from KCBA who will start the presentation this evening. I am going to post the presentation to the screen. And Mr. Montaigne, when you need me to advance slides, you'll just let me know. Is that okay?
Yes, okay. So I guess tonight we're going to go through this presentation to evaluate how we got to where we are on the soils. In the pre-construction phase, while we're designing the building, we go through the site and we drill test borings. In this job, we had 17 test borings, which picked up the corners of the buildings and the perimeter of the building, and a couple within the inside footprint of the building. And that's to determine the soil conditions, mostly for bearing and compaction, but it will also find other issues with the soil. And they were all found to be acceptable for construction. We also did 5 test pits, which are to determine infiltration rates, and that's for the storm sewers. And those were all around the site. And they were also acceptable for the storm basins, which means there's not a lot of water in the soil and it can accept the recharge. And then now during the construction process, we have a geotechnical engineer who's out on site, Hills Carnes, and they go through as we excavate, as we pull off the topsoil and then start compacting the soil, they go through and test it for compaction so it'll meet the bearing capacity. And they've been on site again since February, and they're on site throughout the process until we have footings installed, always testing the soils to make sure the compaction's there. They're also going to test the concrete, the masonry and steel further on through the project to make sure everything is up to speed. Next slide, please. So the reason for this change, even though the soil was in good condition when we did the test borings, we did have this early spring a lot of rain. Then we had, which soaked the soil. Then we had 8 inches of snow, which sits on the soil and it just drains slowly in. and followed by another 2 inches of rain, which helped supercharge that snow and add water to the soil conditions. While Hills Carnes was doing their testing after the snow and rain, they found it to be unsuitable. The particular soil we have has small particles, and although it's good for bearing if undisturbed, when it gets wet, it doesn't have the binding necessary for compaction, and it becomes mushy. So on good weather days, like today, what they can do is they scarify the soil. They open it up to allow the air to dry out the soil. And then when rain's expected, they can proof roll it so it has a hard surface. The rainwater will run off and it'll dry out that way. They also slope it when they proof roll it to the back of the site, which is where one of our storm basins are. And they're doing that on a daily basis currently. Next slide. So with the conditions we have, and again, the soil is very wet through the long period of rain and snow. There's three options that the geotechnical engineer came up with to move forward. The first option is to add concrete mix to the soil, and that'll harden the soil. They mix it together and it hardens the soil so you have better bearing. It actually soaks up the water that's in the soil to form the concrete. And that is the quickest and most cost-effective way to move forward. There's no long-term impacts on the environment with this mixture underground. Unfortunately, it does cost to bring in the equipment, to bring in the concrete mix and the labor to blend it into the top 12 inches. There's a cost of $75,000. Option two from the geotechnical engineer was to remove 12 inches of soil on top, which is roughly 81 dump trucks worth of soil, and bring in new soil that will compact. One of the pros is this could move along faster than option one, but there's 81 dump trucks of soil that has to be removed from the site. And before it can be removed, that would have to be certified as clean fill. So until that time, it's going to sit on the site while we're trying to still work around it to build the building. And the site, because of the existing school and parking and playgrounds, is very tight for our construction process. And the cost of that, because of the hauling and removal of soil, well, it's $95,000 plus the removal of soil from the site, the hauling of that. The third option would be to allow the contractor to continue to scarify the top of the soil, let it air dry, and when rain's forecasted, they'd have to roll it back under. So we'll get a little bit of drying, and then they'll have to roll it under, and then they'll have to open it up again. It'll dry some more. There's no cost to doing that. It's just the cost of time. And that could take, depending on the weather, it could take a long time. And we have a couple good days this week that they are drying it out. As today they had it opened up and they're drying it out. So conditions are improving, but it's going to take a while to get some of that soil at the lower end of the site dry. Next slide. Excuse me. So our recommendation in moving forward would be to go with option one, to put in the concrete soil mix. They can do that, starting next week, I believe. And then it'll firm up the soil and they can start filling and get their foundations in sooner. Keep the project moving.
Thank you, Mr. Montaigne. Are there questions from members of the board? And just so you know, we can ask questions of both Eric and Bob from KCBA, or from Dan and his team from Fidavia if need be. So we're here to provide whatever information you need as a board. Mr. Navarrete.
Yeah, I guess just to, excuse me, just to open questions. Certainly, we've started a project in January and February, right? And we knew that there was going to be, wet soil. And I know we've gotten a little bit more precipitation than we bargained for. I guess, can you talk in more detail about what's done at the site on a day-to-day basis to protect the soil, and then kind of the timeline as to when we started noticing this, when things were certified, and then what led us to finally make the call to say that, opening up the soil and letting it dry is not going to be sufficient.
Mark, you got that?
Yeah, sure. So the day-to-day operations there, like it was outlined in the slideshow, they roll it. If we're expecting rain, or every night they roll it with a 2% slope, so that if it does rain, water will shed off the pad. Additionally, as they're scarifying it on nice days to let the air get to it and help dry it, they have installed some temporary trenches and wells with sump pumps in to also try and help get the water out of the building pad.
Thanks.
If I could just add, Ralph, just a couple things, just some context, because some of the board members might recall the alternates and how we awarded the project, but it's not abnormal to have change orders, particularly with a new building, unlike a renovation, where a renovation, you kind of run into this more unforeseen conditions in the course of opening things up in a building. In a new construction, you don't have it because it's all brand new. But where you have your potential exposure is in the site. And we did, as a team, spend time analyzing that based on the time the project was going out to bid. And there were two alternates that were selected when the project was awarded. One had to do with making the site unclassified to the point below, basically the point of that the contractor is required to dig to. So anything that would be encountered up to that point is liquidated, and we're not going to see a cost for because of that. And then secondly, the other alternate, I believe, had to do with backfill. Because of the time of year, we anticipating there might be a problem with backfill, because you can't just dig and do work and leave the site exposed on the sides of the building and the walls and such. You have to backfill as you go. That is also covered in an alternate, so we will not see any additional costs for that. The pad we're talking about is the building pad. So I forget how much it is, if it's a foot or 2 feet or whatever it is. That pad is going to be built up with additional material, non-soil material, that is also included in the contract documents, where we won't be seeing a cost. So after the pad gets brought up, they'll have to dig out for walls. The mechanical, electrical, plumbing trades will be making Swiss cheese out of that pad to run all of their lines. We will not see additional cost for any of that as weather might continue. So I'm sorry to digress there for a second, but I just thought a little context to this particular change order.
Thanks.
I have one relatively quick question and just a comment. One is, on Tuesday evening, Monday evening, whatever, we had the property meeting, whatever evening that was. I didn't get a chance, or if I had a chance, I didn't have the question. Just out of curiosity, if we had the winter we had last year, which the precipitation was way less. I know you're not crystal balls, but would we have had this big of an issue?
No, and I need to answer that one. I will crystal ball it to a degree, but I need to. Okay, so this change order, there's two components to a change order. Most of the time, it's not all the time, but most of the time it's cost and also time. We are taking the position, we are taking the position that there's no more additional time required, because the weather was, whereas we knew we've liquidated certain scope items, but we haven't liquidated this scope item. The reality is, we understand that you have rain and snow and bad weather and such this time of year. So until such time that the contractor can demonstrate that there was a contractual deviation sufficient to warrant an extension of time, we will not entertain one. So having said that, I guess it's easier just to state the obvious. February, we had a very wet month, but I don't think I really would rather not get into the time component. Yes, last February was a different February than this February, but beyond that, I'd rather not get into the time particularly because we're not going to entertain it right now.
And I guess what I meant was this exasperate? I know. Sorry,
Well,
I've been teaching poetry all day. I'm really having a tongue twister here.
Andrea,
Was this made worse by the fact that we had the snow? I'm just because yes, you can't start in April because April showers bring May flowers. But this was an incredible amount of snow, is what I'm trying to say. Or could we have been here anyway?
To touch on that, the geotech report that was done pre-bid that's in the contract was completed mid-February last year. And that's what we based everything off was those soil analysis that Mr. Montaigne touched on I think the first slide.
And then the only other comment I had, because I don't have an issue with this, I understand things happen, is I will just back up. I joined the IU towards the second half of them renovating the building on Main Street, which you all know about. And that was an extensive renovation of an older building that, needed work. And all the change orders came at the surprise of, opening up plumbing and finding things that you didn't know in a quicker, not quicker, but without opening it up, you couldn't know. So I will back up that comment. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to, I know Eric is trying to say something. We've had projects, it's not uncommon, where you do excavation like for a building pad and the moisture is fine, but the soil itself is not acceptable. It could be clay soils that just don't reach the proper compaction level. And some of you might recall with the stadium project, we had borings on that project as well that were done, but the borings only give you a representative sample of the site. It's not a guarantee that every condition is going to be the same everywhere. I'm sorry, Eric, I interrupted you. I apologize.
No, it's okay, Dan. Your question is a good question. If it's not even about last year, if we would have gotten that snow in January and in that rain in January or even December, we're not talking about we're not talking about this issue at this point. It's just it just happened to occur at the end of the month, and then the rain that got in there, I think, kind of got that soil a little too much moisture content, and now it's just not going to be compactable for a while. So I just think that's just really unfortunate timing.
Other questions from members of the board? Ms. Aubrey-Larsenese?
Thank you. So, Bob, the test borings that you talked about, that's what Mark was just saying was done in mid-February of last year, of 2020?
Yes.
Okay, how deep did those test borings go?
They go down till they hit rock. So they were more than 17 feet in some cases. I don't have them right here.
17 feet?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well below the level we're at right now.
Okay.
It's a max of 25 feet till they hit refusal.
Okay. The other concern that I have here is, so we're replacing the top 12 inches of material, or not replacing it, I'm sorry, treating the top 12 inches of material. And we are reasonably sure that this problem does not persist below that 12-inch mark?
Yeah, that's what the recommendation was from Hills and Carnes, our third-party geotech engineer.
Okay, so if we encounter this problem again later, and it's determined that there is a moisture issue below that 12-inch mark, if it's the contractor's recommendation that we only address the top 12 inches, what happens then?
Well, it's a third-party inspection agency. They're hired direct with the district to test the soils and concrete. And
I guess Yeah, I'm sorry, Mark. My concern is that if we determine that there is still a problem, even after treating the top 12 inches of soil, and we are then brought another change order for that. This is something that we're doing in good faith based on their recommendation. I have concerns about that. The other issue that I have is that if the soil was determined to be acceptable last year, and the contractor was in fact taking the appropriate measures prior to rain with rolling the soil, rolling it in the appropriate direction, rolling the appropriate amount of compaction. Why did we still have such an issue with moisture?
Because it rained and snowed.
No, I know that, but that's why they go the extra mile before a storm. When you know that weather's coming, you spend the extra time to roll it the right way, to make sure that you're rolling it so that the water has a place to go, so that it's not ending up in your work area. I'm wondering if there were measures that could have been taken during the site work that could have prevented the degree of this water infiltration.
I really think they handled it as best they could. I mean, when they mobilized, we had over a half a foot of snow on the site, and we let it sit, thinking it'll melt, and we ran out of time, pulled the snow off the building pad, and then stripped the topsoil, trying to maintain schedule. There was a section of the building that did pass a proof roll. The sub base was dry enough, past the compaction test. But there's two other areas. So 2/3 of the building pad was just too saturated.
And if I can clarify, just from the field guy's perspective, they actually left the topsoil on as a measure to help seal it up longer than they were expecting to, because we knew the 10-day looked terrible. I mean, we had rain, we had snow on the 10-day. We left the topsoil on. We held off on stripping it as a measure to keep that moisture out, and that's effectively what it did. I mean, if we had opened that up to the elements, it could have been measurably worse.
Okay. The only other question I had was just looking at some of the pictures that were provided to us this afternoon. I just have concerns about, there's a lot of areas where we have ponding water next to trenches. And that, that's obviously going to make the problem worse. So I would hope that we're taking measures to prevent that from happening in the future.
Mark, Dan, Shelby.
Yeah, I'll just add, I mean, I'm not on site, obviously, and obviously we need to do that, but we don't expect an issue in the trenches, because I'm not sure what trenches you're talking about. I'm not sure your particular trenches. I'm not looking, I don't have those
It's
pictures in front of me. But
for the sewer line. The sewer line placement in particular, I'm looking at that one picture of the sewer line placement, and you can see that there's some ponding water and possibly some ice in the area around the trench. So I just want to make sure that we are, continuing to be diligent in our efforts to minimize the impact of the water, because,
We have, sorry.
No, go ahead.
We have hit unsuitable soils through the trenching, but that alternate that we took was to subgrade and bottom a trench. So that soil actually was unsuitable for compaction, and the contractor had to bring in structural fill to backfill those trenches as part of that alternate.
At its own cost.
And the sewer line is also the furthest down in elevation. That is actually where all the water's running, and it's not part of the pad. The pad is further up from that in elevation. So any ponding you're seeing down by the sewer trench, that's where we're actually trying to get the water to go, so that it's tailing off of the pad.
But having said that, Absolutely. I mean, the contractor, and we need to ride the contractor to prevent ponding all over the site as necessary. So yes, that's a requirement that is in the beginning, and it'll continue on, throughout the project. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, and I mean, I think at the end of the day, I see the three alternatives that we have before us, and I get where we're coming from on this. I just want to make sure that we are, that we're being careful, that we're minding our pennies here, because I don't want to see this become a trend. So
And
that's
we
all.
share the same concern. We discussed it in property. Every single change order we take extremely seriously. I'd like to think that the last several years of our time with the district in terms of returning contract contingency repeatedly, I mean, we share the same concern.
No, I know you do, Dan. I know we go way back. So I just want to make sure that we're all keeping that in mind. So thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Other questions from members of the board? Ms. Drummond?
Are we reasonably sure there's no other like geology going on in terms of water in that area, like springs, water table, that kind of issue that could contribute also to this, or that are undiscovered?
Be careful what you ask for. We're not right. The building pad is already articulated, right? We're not aware of any springs or any surprises right now, right? Like we should be out of the surprise, right?
Okay.
No, I'm asking the guys. I'm sorry, I'm not asking you.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the screen, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, if we were to encounter anything like that to date, would have been in the test borings, during design.
But I guess the question that was asked was, are we reasonably certain that we're not going to hit any more of this? Have we kind of resolved the exposure in the site? Do we anticipate any more?
No.
Okay, thank you.
You, Ms. Drummond. Any other questions from members of the board?
Just that, how you say, don't quote me, I will quote him on that. No.
Mr. McGinnis?
We're 40 days into a project here, and all of a sudden everyone's shocked that it snowed around here. And we took, 17 bore pits in an area, and, oh, well, you can't do the whole area. You can't hold us to anything. And I feel that everybody around the table is just going, whoa, not my fault, not my fault. So KCBA, Mike, when did you find out about this change order?
Sorry, trying to find the mute button. Tuesday.
When was the change order placed? For Davey, do we know that? When was the third party testing done?
We received the report from Hills and Carnes on Wednesday, and we received the change order from the contractor late in the day Friday.
But it took 5-6 days for KCBA to be alerted?
That was following Tuesday.
Okay. So, Mike, all of a sudden we're hearing about bad soil, right? All we saw in your slides were balloons and fireworks and congratulations, we're going to start going off in February. Why didn't we ever say, you know what, might not be a good idea to do this construction timeline? This is all news to us now, and everyone's going, wow, I can't believe it snows and rain in the winter around here. Why is that?
Can I answer that question?
No, I'm asking Mike.
I think, as you said, it's not a surprise that it snows in February or rains in March. And guess what? It's going to rain in April too. It is the contractor's responsibility to make sure that that site is available and suitable for construction at the phasing that they're about to undertake. And right now we're doing a lot of stuff that's underground. There are conditions that can be above and beyond Mother Nature concerns that can add what can be considered unsuitable conditions to say, hey, we knew it was going to snow, we knew it was going to rain, but this is in excess of what it should be. And that's something then for the construction team and to take a look at and say, all right, here's what's reasonable. Here's a cost that makes some sense. Of course it's going to snow, but it snowed a little bit more than we thought it was. Here's what we think is a reasonable solution between all the parties. I agree with your frustration, certainly, this early in the project. But coming out of the ground is the hardest thing. It's also absolutely key in keeping everybody on schedule. A year from now, if we're still talking about, well, we're still delayed and we weren't able to make up time from last winter. It's a lot harder to make that time up next year than it is to make it up now. Go ahead, Dan.
But in property, there was bandied about then, oh, we'll just pay them overtime. So that's another cost overrun.
I don't recall saying we pay people overtime.
We'd work on the weekends as a possible solution eventually to this, to catch up.
I just for clarification, I said when some of the tactics that one would use to make up time would either be to borrow time from other places that were originally scheduled to be a certain amount of time but didn't take that long, and another way to do it is to have work done over the weekends, which would require overtime and possibly additional cost. But that's if we need to make up time. And according to Mr. Sakala's statements at this point in time, he's not suggesting that that's of an issue.
So
Dan, I just want to make sure I'm correct. I'm not speaking for you, but that's what I understand you telling us.
Yeah, no, I'm very sensitive to the change order. I left the property meeting feeling bad that I feel we didn't clearly communicate sufficiently to make everyone feel comfortable about what was going on. No one is surprised about weather. We have this argument with contractors on every project to some degree, but I share that we share the same argument, the same opinion that it does rain, snow, and it does it at different frequencies and temperatures based on the time of year. And the contract documents address that in terms of time in the project. So again, we're not coming to you asking for additional time as part of this change order. That will only happen if and when the contractor can demonstrate that the weather was to such levels that it exceeded the disparity, the amount of differential that is in the contract documents. So that's not part of this conversation.
okay, so our prime is getting a sub to do this work, is how I read it. How many quotes did they go out and get?
I'll just jump in. I doubt it. I imagine they used the site contractor that's currently engaged in the project, and they presented based on that. Without even seeing it.
That's not how I read it. I read it, they were using a sub. So Mark, do you?
Oh, I'm saying it's a sub, but it's their sub. It's the sub that's engaged. Is that incorrect, Mark?
I think the cement part itself, as far as getting it to the site and dispersing it across the building pad, will be a sub of the excavator subcontractor.
Correct.
The excavator will till it in.
Correct. I've read the docs. So how many quotes did they get on that work?
I do not know. And
Okay. Next question for Fidavia. Is this pass through or 1+?
I'm sorry. When you say pass through,
Pass through.
On top of it?
Are they passing it through, or are they putting 5%, 10%, 20%, 1+?
I don't have that in front of me, but guaranteed they're marking it up per the contract documents.
But our owner's rep is not sure what markup they're using.
No, I'm on vacation. I was on vacation Monday and tonight, and I have no idea because
Dan, that is such a bad answer. I'm sorry.
Mark,
That is an embarrassing answer.
I'm just saying what
Mark, do you know how much they marked it up, Mark? You're on mute, Mark.
sorry, 10% overhead profit and bond.
So they have a motive for this change order, because if we all get in our time machine when this was bid, and yeah, I get it. It was an incredibly low bid and we were fortunate for that. But we also said every chance they get to submit a change order to recoup some of their margin, they are going to do that. And we don't ask them to get multiple quotes. We don't ask them what their one plus is. We just take it. This is a bad precedent, guys. This is a very bad precedent 40 days into a job where we're shocked that it snowed and rained. This is not good. I'm done.
Are there other questions from members of the board? Madam President, I don't see any other questions from members of the board. I'll turn the meeting back over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Zerbe. At this point, then we will take public comment on board action items. So if there's anyone who has pre-registered to speak this evening who would like to speak to any of our voting items, as a reminder, you have 4 minutes, and please state your name and municipality of residence. First up, I have Dr. Malik.
You hear me all right?
Yes, I can.
Thanks, Jim Malik, Worcester. I predict this will not be the last change order that we see. So this is what we get for giving KCBA Architects $1.5 million. I know you're smiling, Mr. Kelly. You were smiling on the way to the bank with, like Mr. McGinnis said, the balloons and the rosy scenarios. Let me ask you this. From what I hear from you guys assumed, and I'm not saying the board, but the people who were in charge of this, that the weather would be exactly the same as it was last February. Nobody had a plan for if the weather wasn't like last February, like snow, rain. Go walk in your backyards right now. They're saturated. So if somebody had a plan to address that, I'd love to hear it. The plan seems to be we made core samples in February. Those are the conditions that we'll have next February. That makes no sense to me at all. I heard somebody say the test borings were done at the quote unquote corners of the building. Does that mean they weren't done over the entire surface area? Maybe they can explain that. And that may be part of the problem because the core samples were not taken over the entire area of the building plot. Was there any considerations for precipitation by KCBA that would affect the soil and compaction? Because I don't remember that being presented at any time at any of those presentations. Did KCBA consider the time of the year that this project was moving forward? Who's in charge of evaluating the property and the ground prior to the approval of the project? My recollection is KCBA was given full control over the project at all aspects of the project. And they actually appointed some of their people to other roles in the project as well, the people they work with. So this is not a hard thing at all for me. I say you go with the option, the 75 grand, and you just take it out of KCBA's 1.5 million. That's what I would do, because I'm sitting here saying right now, hey, KCBA wanted the glory. Okay, well, you got your glory. Give us our 75 grand and fix it. As far as Mr. McGinnis, yeah, he was concerned about the number of bids and quotes for the work. I agree with that, 100%. And although I agree with him, I need to know why there was no competitive bids or any concern for competitive bids for KCBA's position for the Eagleville project. Mr. McGinnis makes a great point about bids. We didn't have any bids for KCBA in Eagleville. They were it.
Dr. Malik, that's not an agenda item for this evening.
Well, I think it applies to the situation currently that shows you're not doing competitive bidding. And I'm giving you an example of how you're not doing it. So it does relate, regardless of what you think. You spoke about pictures. Are they posted on the website? Ms. Larson, you talked about pictures. Did you post them for us to look at tonight? If you didn't, will you post those pictures for us so we don't have to do right to know requests for some simple pictures? I really don't think that you have to redact pictures of wet soil. Now, your lawyers will find a way to do it, but I think pictures of wet soil, I think we can get that. So if you could put them on the website for us, I'd love to see what's going on over there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Malik. Next, I have Joe Rittenhouse.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Thank you very much. So I want to keep it as briefly as I can.
I need your name and municipality
Oh,
first.
I'm sorry. Joe Rittenhouse, Lower Providence. Thank you. I want to keep it short. In the meeting in which the Arrowhead project was approved, the president of the board specifically asked, and I believe it is the third question in the meeting, will the heavy snow impact construction moving forward in any way? And the direct answer given was no. That is available for the public to watch. That is the question that was asked by the board, a great question in due diligence. And the answer was no. And we've come not even 40 days into the project, and we find that now the answer is yes. I don't think that due diligence was done going into this, and I wish that at the time that answer was given, even the perspective possibility of this could have come up in some kind of conversation, so that we're not blindsided by one change order and then another one 2 weeks from now and so on and so forth. I just wanted to say that I think that it comes down for the board to vote on this. It comes down to simply money versus time and who's responsible for paying that money. If time is more important, then obviously the first or second choice is better. But if money, the taxpayers' money, and the district's responsibility, I believe that there is definitely consideration that should be put into who should be paying for this money. I think it was somebody who said, given the financial challenges of the district, the board should consider all options for controlling spending, and that would be the approach going forward for new perspectives. So like I said, the question was asked, the answer was given, and now the answer is incorrect compared to what the question was asked by the board president. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. And next I have Jessica Bradbury.
Good evening, Jessica Bradbury, Lower Providence Township. So as others stated, Fidivia, KCBA, everyone had said very clearly all along that weather would not be a factor, and that the schedule was put together taking into account normal weather in this part of the state during this time of the year. I still haven't heard anybody talk about what is the impact of option 3, do nothing. Will that delay the timeline? If it does, what is the potential cost for number 3? I mean, it's no cost right now, but is there going to be long-term costs? Because otherwise we're not taking into account all of the costs of each of the options. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else? Seeing no one, we will move on with our agenda. May I have a motion to approve the suspension of board policy 006.2 with regard to the limitation on the number of directors participating electronically?
Winners.
Reese.
Mr. Winters, and a second, Ms. Reese. Any comments from the board? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries 8-0. And now may I have a motion to approve the change order number 1 with the selection of option 1 from E.R. Stubner of Reading, PA in the amount of $75,700.
Navarette.
Thank you, Mr. Navarette. And a second?
Winners.
Thank you, Mr. Winters. Any comments from the board?
Yeah, I think there were some questions from the public related to the pictures being posted. I imagine that is something we would consider. There was some discussion about the timing of the do nothing option and the delay and the timing of the schedule. I guess what comes up to me is the thought, if you have a very, very wet spring, I don't know, you probably get to a point where that delay really does affect, even if you couldn't make that date, but if somebody could comment towards that. And then I just have another question, just my experiences outside of Methacton is that the supply chain is getting tighter. I know there's port issues in Los Angeles. I don't know where all our materials are coming from. I guess on the horizon, is there any concern about supplies in probably in the next 9-12 months? It's a generic question, but not so much. If there's going to be other issues around that, then it makes that do nothing option a consideration as well. I don't know who I addressed that to, but I leave it open.
Are you looking for a response right now?
Yeah, please.
We've had supply chain issues. I'll answer the questions in reverse. We've had supply chain issues since COVID. So we do expect more in the months ahead, not in the weeks ahead. So that's kind of an understood and anticipated item. As far as the schedule is concerned, I believe the building is supposed to be turned over in July July of 2022. So yes, there would be, if we sat and did nothing or waited for the weather to come around, that would impact the project. And I will respectfully say I'd rather not, in the context of a public meeting, get into how that connects with the other contractors and the nuances of that. Happy to do it, but it's not appropriate for a public meeting to be doing it.
Yeah, I think it's also, sorry, Paul, I didn't know if you were done.
I am.
Okay. I think it's important to notice or to comment that the timeline on this project is also not just a linear timeline, that there's a lot of complexities to it and interconnected parts. So it's not just a matter of, we can wait a couple of weeks now and it'll just push the entire thing back by a couple of weeks. There are certain windows that things have to be done in, and it's construction project management is a challenging task.
And Mr. Winters, I'm sorry, I'm not blowing you off in any way. It's just, it's a legal matter that I choose not to get into. And again, the goal is to finish this thing on time, and that is our intent and what we expect to happen. The sausage making to get there is a little different, and it's a little complex sometimes.
I will just add just quickly about the timing is many of us took time to tour new buildings that were just built in the area. And we spoke to all of those people about any construction issues and delays they had. And one building had a positive spin on their construction delays, where of course you want a building finished in July and August to get ready for the school year, but one of their buildings was not ready. And the children's, I forget all the details, but the kids literally carried their supplies, into their new building. It was one of those very similar to ours, where there was an old building and a new building. And it, you deal with things as you go along. It is our hope that that doesn't have to happen, especially since just the pandemic already, even though this is more than a year out, we would love that school year to start on a on-time note. So it is just my intention to support this. It is my intention also to just make all the parties aware to please, the timelines, not just the construction timelines, but the timelines of the communication of who knows what, when, just to really be, I know everybody is aware that when you do these public projects, you have a board that you have to deal with on top of your work, plus the community. Try to build a Wawa somewhere and see how many comments, see how many there, people are involved. But anyway, I would support this, but I think we've all brought up good points and good, unfortunately good concerns. And it is our hope, we've committed to this project, that it goes smoothly, and that it goes on time.
Yeah, I think it's also, as much as I have questions, I have concerns, the bottom line is we need this soil to pass compaction. We need to be able to continue with this building. Obviously, replacing the fill is the more expensive option. And the do nothing option, while it sounds like it's, you know, a great option because it doesn't cost us anything, it presents us with a whole slew of variables that could end up costing us even more further down the road in terms of, you know, not knowing when exactly the soil is going to be ready. We can't see what weather is coming in the next month or two. You know, and when those timelines get impacted, the possible changes in costs there. So I personally would rather deal with a fixed amount that is a known entity than dealing with, you know, a big question mark by just doing nothing and hoping for the best. So I will reluctantly support this.
The only thing I will add is just by, you know, we see you there in front of us giving us this explanation. I ask that you put full due diligence to review everything with all parties involved and come to the property, because we don't want to be put in this position and we will question it. And so just please allow us that. So that's all.
Absolutely.
Just a couple comments on my side. There was a question about borings. I think it was noted earlier that those borings were conducted not just along the perimeter, but also throughout the pad as well. I guess my question then maybe for Dan or for Mike, the question was brought up about competitive bids on subs. Is it customary to get competitive bids for sub work on when something like this is time sensitive?
Mike, I'll take a stab unless. The answer is it depends, Ralph. The costs are usually reviewed by us and the architect. And if we feel it's out of line, you know, based on our respective firms' estimates, then yes. So it really depends. This change order is just happening fairly quickly. I mean, it crossed my mind as well, particularly with Mr. McGinnis's comment about the subcontractor. We've run into situations where we have, I mean, I can think of multiple situations where we've asked to get other prices. So if you hadn't raised that, that would have been a question we would have asked, you know, out of this meeting. But again, Mark and Shelby may already be on that, but it's a fair question. So it really depends. Mike, did you have anything you wanted to add on top of that?
No, I mean, I know the speed is of the essence. I think that's one of the urgencies of taking this tonight, is making sure that you know, we're not delayed any further than the soil conditions already have. You know, we'd certainly like to see this number less, and maybe that's something that we can work to over the coming days and weeks to see, you know, if that area can be reduced. You know, we've had some sunny days, maybe that can be reduced a little more, but you know, like we said, it's paramount to get out of the ground as quickly as you can, and this is really kind of a time critical situation.
If I may, at the property, I did, you know, a recommendation was this option as a not to exceed, in hopes that, you know, with this nice weather that we're having, some of the areas may dry out on their own and we don't have to do that.
Thanks, Mark. I guess my last question, I guess my last comment, maybe then we'll come around change orders. Certainly on a project of this size, we're going to have change orders, right? It's just paramount, to use that word, I guess, again, that we limit the size and scope of them. As you guys said, right, the toughest part is getting out of the ground. So let's make sure these are few and far between as we go forward. I do expect that we will see them again. I do expect we might have a special meeting again to approve them. We've had to do it before on smaller projects, and I expect we'll do it on one as large as this. So we should all expect it. Things are going to happen. I do have one other question then too. This was put forward originally, as Mark said, as a not to exceed figure. Is there, in the way the motion is written right now, Dr. Zerbe, are we committed to the 75.7? Or if ultimately the cost of the work is lower, do we then just process a second change order as a credit against this work?
I think it'd be cleaner to do as a not to exceed.
Yeah, and I actually was thinking that maybe we could consider amending the motion. I think, Mr. Navarrete, it was you that made the motion, and Mr. Winters, you seconded it.
Yeah, so Kim, then
Hold on, just
go ahead.
yeah, just give me a minute. I mean, we can approve anything, but if the change order doesn't agree with the wording, your vote means nothing. So let me just give me a second. All right, I gotta check on something.
I think we may be using the phone a friend option here.
We have Jeopardy theme music we could share in the background.
Well, I actually had a couple of other points that I was going to make in the meantime. I know that there was a question about whether or not pictures will be posted. And while pictures of piles of dirt don't seem terribly exciting or controversial, I will say that I would still get the approval of our solicitor before we would post these to the website because of security concerns. We're dealing with the construction of a building. We're dealing with, potential floor plan and that sort of thing. So yes, I do believe that we need to share whatever information we can share, but again, security is paramount in this situation. Dr. Zerbe, do you have a comment on that then, the motion to amend?
Right. So in the document itself, it lists the price that is on the agenda here. So in my opinion, the 75,700 is the maximum for which we are authorized to spend, and therefore if the bill is for less than that, then it's less than. So you could. My recommendation is you leave it as it is, and it wouldn't be more than that amount.
Okay. Then there will be no change.
Anyone else have any other questions, concerns, comments? I also wanted to piggyback on something that Mr. Navarrete said, that, while it is unfortunate that we are here so early in the process with a special meeting to approve this change order, it's sort of a necessary evil. The other option is that we don't approve the change orders as a board and that they just are automatically accepted. This is a lessons learned moment from previous boards and previous construction projects where, this process wasn't followed so closely and costs can very easily get out of control. So while none of us really wants to be here at the last minute on a Thursday night, I think it's certainly better than the board not getting involved in these change orders. I think it's important to keep everybody, the board, the community, apprised of the situation and the costs as we're going along. So if we have no other comments, all those in favor of the board action item as posted? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, so the record will show that there was a vote of 7-1 with Mr. McGinnis being opposed. And with that, we will move on to courtesy of the floor. And this is a time for members of the public to speak on any matter that could come before the board at a future meeting or whenever. Please keep your comments to 4 minutes. Introduce yourself with your name and municipality first. Dr. Malik, you're in.
Jim Malik, Worcester. You hear me all right?
Yes, I can.
Good. So just so I understand what you're going to do, you're going to waste taxpayer money on your solicitor to determine whether pictures of wet dirt is a security issue. And you wonder why your right to know costs are out of control. I mean, that's just the most ridiculous thing I think I ever heard. Were you aware that you violated the sunshine law twice at your last regular meeting, Ms. Chairman? Twice you did it. And the problem was I raised my hand to object and you didn't recognize me. You got some serious issues. You know, you talk about your law firm is sitting right up front there with you, allowing you to do it. So first, you didn't properly announce the executive session that you held. It's spelled out in the sunshine law itself, and the settlement agreement that you guys signed with me and a few other litigants. For litigation, you have to announce the case, court, and docket numbers. It's clear, but you didn't do any of that. Second, when I saw you violate that law, I raised my hand and kept it raised for the entire meeting. You just kept putting my hand down and didn't recognize me. That's another violation of the sunshine law. Section 710.1C states that anyone can object to a violation of the sunshine law at any time during the meeting, regardless of whether they're checked in or not. So it's no surprise that your current law firm doesn't seem to understand the sunshine law in relation to public participation, because I would suggest you check out the Kelly McGrath versus Board of School Directors of Scranton number 20 CV 3698, where your current law firm represented the school district who violated the sunshine law and the judge voided the vote. That's your law firm. Now, I have 30 days to file a complaint with the Court of Common Pleas. I just want to know from you that if somebody raises their hand during the meeting, that you'll acknowledge us consistent with the sunshine law. If the answer is no, then maybe we'll have a judge tell you to do it. There was no mention of the $5.6 million surplus at the Finance Committee meeting when they proposed a 2.7% tax increase. There was no discussion of using that surplus to offset the increase. Instead, Dr. Zerbe presented the option of full-day kindergarten at a cost of approximately $1 million a year. Where's the financial or fiduciary responsibility with you guys? With that in mind, when you guys took over, we were ranked number 11 in the state. The new niche ranking just came out. Methacton's ranked at 74. 74. Now, we've heard discussions regarding building a new Arrowhead at $50 million total cost, $7 million Eagleville project plus interest, Black Lives Matters protests on school property, a diversity and inclusion committee. Where are the discussions about education, test scores, and our ranking? You know, I forgot Mr. Navarrete says you don't rely on those things, you don't look at them. I think it's time that you start focusing on what's important to kids in the district, like their education. You know, now, is there any reason that you guys can't hit the record button during Zoom committee meetings and post them for the public? Is there any reason you can't? Because I record them with my camera and I can put them on YouTube if you want me to. I mean, but why don't you just push the button during a committee meeting to record and let everybody have access? I mean, that's transparency. So that's the thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Malik. Next, Jessica Bradbury.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. Good evening, Jessica Bradbury, Lower Providence Township. So once again, overspending and a lack of transparency are common themes with this district. Tonight's agenda wasn't posted accurately until almost noon today, even though we knew what would be covered based on property on Monday. The special meeting was announced yesterday, so why wasn't the agenda posted at that time? I understand an urgency to get a decision made tonight, but how much time would we have needed to get at least one other competitive bid? Could we have had that by next week's working session? And now the board president is asking for more legal fees to be incurred. So what, we're gonna have redacted pictures of dirt I'm not sure if all of you caught last night's meeting, but I did some calculations for you. Sweet Stevens December legal fees of $144,792.20. Even though we don't have a contract with them, or at least you wouldn't turn one over during my right to know request, indicates that their bill rate is anywhere from $125 to $195 an hour. So with some basic math and the number of weeks and the number of hours in a day, it looks like we have 5 to 7 attorneys working for our district full-time just from that firm. Is that right? Why does the board require members of the public that wish to speak to register in advance by 5 p.m.? If we were in person, that requirement does not exist. I read the board policy and I don't find that requirement anywhere. And that brings me to my next question. Are we even following all of the board policies? Policy 801 governs public record, and it states that a board designated open records officer must maintain a log of all record requests and their disposition. So I submitted my own right to know request to obtain public records and try to better understand our nearly $1 million in legal fees over the past 4 months. I asked for a copy of that log, bearing in mind it must exist according to board policy 801, and my request was denied, stating no such record exists. So is the district not following board policies, or is the district withholding public records and violating the Sunshine Act? I brought it up last month and several board members seemed in favor of it, and yet I've heard nothing about it. Board policy 006.2, meeting in person. Can you please provide us with an update for the plans to return to the boardroom? Will we conduct the working session and the regular meeting this month in a hybrid fashion and allow both remote and in-person participants? Thank you.
Next, I have Joe Rittenhouse.
Hello, Joe Rittenhouse, Lower Providence. So I just wanted to kind of recap everything that just happened. I wanted to thank School Board Director McGinnis for passionately speaking and asking questions that I feel needed to be asked. I feel as if there was a lot of go along to get along, despite the fact that these questions were asked prior to the approval of the project, and one answer was given, and now that answer has changed. So, and that while I agree it may be a necessary evil to make these changes, nothing was done to rectify the fact that this was a genuinely black and white answer that was given, and we got one and we got the other. So I wanted to speak to that. I also just wanted to point out that I'm not sure what the coming weather looks like, but according to multiple 10-day forecasts, we're looking at much more rain in the coming weeks, despite the nice weather now, which I'm sure everyone's loving. So when it comes to the transparency of the board, I just kind of wish we had gone for, maybe tonight we could have said, hey, what is the timeline we have to fall into to make this decision? Is it now? Great, then let's do it, and we'll own it. But can we make this decision tomorrow? Can we make this decision Monday? How long will it take us to get a bid from somebody else? None of these kinds of questions were answered or even asked. And so I think that there's it's the path of least resistance in any capacity that is just a little frustrating. And I just wanted to quote, something about controlling the costs of the district. Regarding expenditures, the board should be asking questions after, multiple emails, text messages, things like that. Why does this administration continue to request the board approves different consultants without looking to people in the district who would who have the required expertise, but may be willing to provide assistance at no cost? If spending is necessary, and if it is so, is it being done in the most cost-effective manner possible? That was the position of every member of this board less than 5 years ago. And now none of those questions were asked. So that being said, I guess the last thing I just wanted to say was thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else then for courtesy of the floor? Okay, seeing none. Any comments from the board? I did want to clarify one thing. The executive session that was announced at the last meeting was first announced by me, and then it was further elaborated on by our solicitor in that same meeting. So some clarification of that was made. One other thing that I was going to address here. Regarding the return to in-person meetings, if we return to in-person meetings, let's see, we have 16 people on our call right now who would have been present in the board meeting. There would be any number of people who would be there required to record the meeting, to handle technical issues related to the dual environment of the meeting. And quite frankly, any in-person gathering over a certain number of people is going to increase the chance of community spread of COVID. I believe that it is in the best interest of our community and to keep our meetings virtual for the time being. We are not suffering in terms of our ability to have these meetings and our ability to have public participation in these meetings. We've had more people paying attention and attending our meetings now than ever before. And I think that it's part of our duty to the community to keep things virtual, to, limit in-person gatherings of people as much as possible. Keeping those numbers down keeps our kids in school. So I think that that's an important point worth making.
And Kim, I just will add to that. Thank you for explaining that, because it's good for all of us to hear your thoughts on that. I wanted to add, we don't meet in a boardroom. It's an LGI. So if for those who haven't been there, it's not as big of a room as you may think it is. And our committee meetings are typically in a small conference room. So could we change location? Yes. But just for those of you who've never been to a committee meeting or a board meeting before Zoom, just FYI, the rooms are not large.
Anyone else before we adjourn? All right, Mr. McGinnis. Motion to adjourn. All right.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, everyone.
Reese, second.
I think everyone seconded that one. All right, everyone, have a good night. Thank you.